Hello and welcome to Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. This is your regular update for all your tillage news and advice. The last round of the CAP draws to a close this December with the new CAP 2023 to 2027 beginning in January. The new rules will affect all farmers. The new alliteration of the CAP will have a familiar feel to other regulations, as most elements such as entitlements, how to apply for payments, and complying with rules to draw down the entitlements will all seem very familiar. The EU has a desire to simplify the rules from one year to the next, but this remains to be seen. There are a number of changes around the basic elements all farmers need to do before any payments are claimed. So today I'm joined by Michael Moloney from the Department of Agriculture to discuss these new requirements and how farmers can comply in 2023. Michael, there's a new term in the new CAP called conditionality. What is conditionality?
Conditionality is effectively going to replace cross-compliance, which farmers would be well aware of, that was introduced with the previous CAP, and even actually the CAP back in 2005. So it's replacing cross-compliance, and what it is it's linking your now what is going to be called your BIS payment and other CAP payments with compliance with certain statutory management requirements, or SMRs, and GAIC standards, Good Agricultural Environmental Condition. So actually currently under cross-compliance, there are 13 SMRs and 7 GAIC, so a total of 20 requirements. Under conditionality, that actually remains the same number, albeit 11 SMRs and 9 GAIC standards. So it's basically an adherence to certain articles of certain regulations. Some of these farmers will be well aware of, such as the nitrate regulations, the habitats, food and feed hygiene. Tillage farmers will be well aware of the plant protection products statutory management requirement. A new one that's been added for 2023 would be the Sustainable Use Directive. And there's been much discussion about GAIC 7, which is crop rotation, which is very relevant and pertinent to tillage farmers. So that's basically what the conditionality is.
So to a degree, it's to a degree nothing new necessarily. Only kind of I suppose some of the old stuff that was already in there. However, it strikes me, is there one of them that's after shifting into it? The issue around crop diversification, does that now shift from greening requirements now into some of this new conditionality?
Yes, Michael, it does. As you know, in the past, you had your basic payment, and you had your scheme payment, and you had your greening payment. So greening now is moving from a kind of a scheme in its own right into conditionality under GAIC 7, crop rotation. And within that, effectively, we had protracted negotiations with the Commission in relation to crop rotation. It's effectively crop diversification with a twist as such.
We might get to some of those kind of things later on, because there's a few elements of that we might just need to discuss. So in terms of conditionality then, does that affect grassland farmers in as much as it does tillage farmers?
Yes, it does. It affects all beneficiaries, whether you're grass, tillage. It affects, but if you're drawing down the payments under the Pillar 1 schemes, which would be the BIS, the CRIS, there's going to be a new young farmer scheme, your ANC, eco scheme, protein aid, all those which tillage farmers in the main would be claiming, or even indeed the Pillar 2 schemes like acres, organic farming. They all must comply with the statutory management requirements as set out under conditionality. So it exists to establish, it's a link between your payment and compliance with those 11 SMRs and the 9 GAICs.
Okay. And so we might do maybe just step through maybe a few of the ones that are, a few of the areas, I suppose, that are going to be more pertinent to tillage farmers maybe than to grassland farmers. The first one I want to maybe touch upon is this buffer strip. And I think most farmers probably have an idea about the buffer strip, that if it comes into the maps they receive as a blue line, that's an area where where a buffer strip is actually needed. And in the rules there at the moment, I think, is it a 2 meter buffer strip? Is that likely to change?
Yeah, correct, Michael. You're bang on. It's currently 2 meters under the GAIC standard and also the nitrates regulations. And that is changing under GAIAC 4. That margin is increasing to 3 metres. And there will be an amendment shortly in the nitrates regulations bringing that into line. So 3 metres will become the new buffer along watercourses visible on a 1 to 5,000 scale map. So that's the blue as you referred to earlier.
Okay, and then there's an additional bit that's coming into it then for 2020. It was actually here for 2022, I think, but it's certainly here for 23. In terms of these late harvested crops, so maybe crops the likes of maybe potatoes or maize or crops like that, there's a need for a wider buffer. You might just explain where that comes out of.
Yes, in relation to the later harvested crops, and they're defined as kind of your vegetable crops harvested after the 15th of September, your fodder beet, sugar beet, main crop potatoes and maize. It excludes cereals and cereal crops and beans. So the requirement there is that you must maintain a 6 metre buffer to protect watercourses in that case. So it's a 6 metre where you have a parcel with late sown crops. Again, the whole idea is to protect the adjoining watercourse.
So how does that overlap then with the existing rules that are already there? So if I'm going into a field, potatoes in it, I already have this 3 metre buffer zone already on the headland. Is it 3 metres plus another 3 metres, or is it 3 metres plus 6 metres of this late harvested crop rule?
It's a total of 6 metres. So if there's already you've already a 3 metre requirement, or currently in the past it was a 2 metre, that's now combined a total of 6 metres. So it's 3 metres plus 3 metres.
3 metres plus 3 metres, and that's an uncultivated, or I suppose in lots of situations that'll probably be a grass, kind of established kind of grass scenario that'll be
uncultivated
over time.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last one, just on the margins bit, that many people maybe are considering acres, and some might be considering the margin options in that. Is the margin additional to everything we talked about there, or can part of that 6 metres count for the acres scheme, if you like?
No, I suppose acres, like, the glass that went before it, they're pillar 2 measures, and they always go beyond what we call baseline. So your baseline is what's there for conditionality or what's in the regulations. So the objective of acres, etc., is you're going beyond that. So if you have 3 metres around your margin around your watercourses, acres will pay for a margin in addition to that. So the one that you have to watch out for is, let's say, for example, a farmer has 6 metres under acres. If they have a late harvested crop in one of those fields, that area, that 6 metres that's there currently, will only meet the baseline. So you need to go beyond that for acres in those kind of late harvested crop fields adjacent to a watercourse.
Just moving on a little bit then, and I suppose the one that maybe caught a lot of people out this year going out was this stubble cultivation after harvest to establish this green cover. And I think most people interacted very well with it, Michael, in terms of they probably got out and cultivated, and others probably gave out a little bit to say that I wanted to cultivate all of it, but I had to leave a bit for the birds and that kind of stuff. But as the season has gone on, and I suppose it's been very wet, there's a number of types of ground out there at the moment. We might just maybe go through a few of those at the moment and kind of see where farmers might be. The first one, I suppose, really is around farmers who may well have ploughed a little bit of ground with the hope of planting that ground, but it's not planted at the moment. Where are those farmers at the moment?
Okay, in relation to nitrates and ploughing, the rules are the same as have been there previously. That when we're on an inspection case where you're looking at arable land ploughed between, in this case, the 1st of July and the 30th of November, which we're still in that window, there have to be necessary measures have had to take place to provide emergence of green cover within 14 days. Now, the problem here is you may have a case where ground has been ploughed and a farmer has not got in there either, let's say, for ploughing or for stubble cultivation. There is no force majeure provisions within the regulations to allow us to ignore that or to fully take into account the weather, but we look at each case by case. So an example would be if a farmer had failed to meet the requirement for ploughing or for the emergence of green cover, we would be asking, well, have you seed purchased? The farmer may have a shed full of seed he just hasn't been able to use because of the weather. Well, that we would consider that as being as mitigating. But if a farmer went out and ploughed up the whole farm as such, you could argue that he was taking a chance or a risk, that it was without taking into account in the event of bad weather in that case. But look, the easiest way is we will treat every case on a case-by-case basis, and we will take into account the current inclement weather.
Okay. And then we have bits and pieces of ground out there that have green cover established on it. They were scratched and the green cover is up, and now the green cover is there. And where does that land sit now in terms of ploughing? Because is it still capable of ploughing that land from the 1st of December, or is there different rules applying to that?
No, that's correct. Like any ground that has been stubble cultivated to meet that new requirement, weather permitting, of course, can be ploughed after the 1st of December and left in a ploughed state. So that's, if I know farmers have been allowed to plough from the 1st of December for the past number of years, but in recent years we certainly haven't had the weather for December ploughing. But if that happens, most certainly the ground that has been established and green cover established on it can be ploughed after 1 December.
And does that hold true then for stubbles or ground, if you like, that a farmer has left for the feeding of the birds, if you like, in that cultivation type scenario? Is that hold true for that as well, that ground could be ploughed as well? The same
in that case. What's happening there is farmers are to leave between 20 and 25% of the cereal land. They should be left there for bird foraging as such, and that area can be ploughed up. You can't use herbicides to kill it off until at least the 1st of February, but you can plough from the 1st of December.
Okay, that's fairly straightforward enough. So, and I suppose the last one then, just to think about, is for farmers that have harvested, I don't know, potatoes or beet only in the last maybe a number of weeks. Is there any requirement on that particular ground to do anything with it between now and?
No, that's exempt from the stubble cultivation requirement. Because look, to be quite honest, you're going to to require somebody to go in and try and stubble cultivate. You're going to do more harm than good in that case. You're going to damage the soil, which is totally contrary to what we're trying to achieve in relation to the GAEX and the regulations.
And I suppose really maybe the lesson or the thing to learn from that, maybe from farmers' point of view, is planning for the likes of those crops next year for 2023. That 6 metre rule, as we talked about earlier, really needs to be put in place for those intersecting watercourses.
Absolutely, Michael. Yeah.
Can we go back then, come back then to the crop rotation bits? We mentioned it a little bit earlier on. That's a big enough issue on farms, but I think most farmers probably have a fairly good idea about the 2 and 3 crop rules in terms of the areas that you have where you need to have those crops. That's not in force for 2023. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely. There's a derogation was available, and we adopted that derogation for 2023. So effectively, farmers can sow 1 crop, 2 crop, 5 crops, whatever suits their plan, their farm as such for 2023. But the new rules in relation to crop rotation come into force in 2024.
Okay, so that's back in 2024, and people will understand that's back in 2024. But there's an additional bit coming on to that, and actually, before I get to the additional bit, I'll go back a little bit to there was exemptions in the current rules around having that type of rotation on the farm, and in the new rules, there's a rule around if 50% of your area is in winter barley. What's the rules around that?
Yeah, the barley, the 50% of our arable area sown to barley is one of the exemptions. Just to take you back, what's required from 2024 is basically crop rotation at parcel level on a 4-year rotation cycle. Now, the reference year hasn't been established as yet. We're still in discussions with the Commission, so it'll either be 23 or 24. So there are a number of exemptions. That's obviously farmers less than 10 hectares of arable land, organic farmers, farmers with more than 75% of their arable area in permanent pasture. And they're exempt from crop rotation and diversification. But in relation to the new crop rotation requirement, farmers with 10 to 50 hectares of arable land, where at least 50% of the arable crop is sown in barley, they're exempt from the crop rotation requirement.
So just to go back a little bit, Michael, this is where people I think might get a little bit confused. So there's the crop rotation in terms of the entire farm, in terms of the you need 2 or 3 different crops over the entire farm. But then there's new rules coming in which are kind of brand new in this round, where each parcel must have a different crop in it over a space of 4 years. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, as I call it, kind of it's crop diversification with a twist. You have the 2 crop, 3 crop rules that they will continue, that if you're in 2024, if you're between 10 and 30 hectares, you have to have 2 crops. Greater than 30, you have to have 3 crops with the usual 75-95% ratio. But what you have to achieve on a 4-year cycle is that there is a crop rotation or a change of crop type at parcel level at least once in that 4-year period. Now, if some people, and there's a certain cohort of specialized tillage farmers who may be just growing spring barley, there is a way of meeting that requirement through secondary crops or catch crops. So in that case, so this is somebody who is not able for whatever reason to meet the crop rotation requirement at parcel level. The alternative for those people are that they sow at least a cover crop, a catch crop, and at least 50% of the arable area at the farm level, and that 50% must be across all parcels at least once in that 4-year cycle. So every year you must sow 50% catch crops, but you must rotate that catch crop to cover all your parcels within a 4-year period.
Okay, and that only extends to, I suppose, literally speaking, smaller farmers who have at least 50% of their area in barley in that particular year.
Yeah, that's the 10 to 50 hectare category, where at least 50% of their area is sown to barley, and that can be winter or spring or a combination. They're exempt from that rotation requirement.
Okay. People might take a while to get their heads around that one, but it's something that they'll certainly have to think about. But it really doesn't apply, probably not to worry too much about it until 2024. But I suppose other people probably may well have a question around, well, hang on there now a second, about this barley rule. What if I'm renting land in? How would I know what was in that, not just last year, but the previous year or the previous year to that? Is there any rules in or around that?
Yeah, well, as you say, it's if you have a farmer that, for let's say in 2027, assuming let's say the commission stipulate that the start of the rotation period is 23, so in 27, there's a big percentage of land managed at Conacre level, so it's moving. They might only have it for a year or 2 or whatever, and I'm somebody that rents a piece of ground for the first time in 2027. Effectively, you've no way of knowing what was in that parcel for the previous 3 years. So we have it stipulated in the CAP strategic plan that we will have a tolerance integrated to manage those type of situations, what we call parcel transfer situations. So there's a number of rules in relation to conditionality, and one is that a farmer is only liable to a sanction under conditionality if it's through an act or omission directly applicable to that or responsible to that farmer. So you could argue they applied for a parcel, they put in a crop of winter wheat in good faith, they didn't know what was in it in the previous 3 years, and it just happened to be winter wheat in the previous 3 years, for example, or winter barley or whatever. That farmer won't and can't be liable to a conditionality sanction because they didn't know what was in it in the previous 3 years. So that's how we're looking at the rental parcels.
Okay. Well, look, I suppose maybe a lot of farmers might be listening to this and kind of thinking to themselves, God, I'm glad those rules aren't coming in until at least 2024 because there's quite a bit in it. Michael, you're a mind of information, and thanks very much for going through those few elements of it. And if you're willing, we might have you back again just to talk about a few other areas in around that.
No problem at all, Michael. You're very welcome.
So that's it for this week, and my thanks to Michael for joining me on the podcast. Finally, don't forget, if you enjoyed the podcast, and recommend it to a friend or colleague, and as always, rate, review and follow on Apple Podcast or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.